Hello and welcome to Convene, Discuss, Collaborate, Building a Transatlantic Digital Skills Community for Research Libraries During the COVID Pandemic, which is part of the virtual DLF Forum Session series this spring. My name is Aaliyah Reich. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager for conferences and events at CLEAR and DLF. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's session. Before I invite each speaker to introduce themselves and we start the conversation, I'd like to remind attendees that we'll be following the Digital Library Federation Code of Conduct, which we'll place in the chat. Audience members, if you have questions for the speakers, please place them in the chat and feel free to chat with one another. We will turn to Q&A at the 45-minute mark of this 60-minute session, and we will take the last question at 55 minutes past the hour. Speakers will now introduce themselves and we'll get the session started.
Hi everyone, my name is William Nixon and I'm Deputy Executive Director of Research Libraries UK and delighted to be here.
Susan, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can do that pause there. Hi, I'm Susan Halfpenny. I'm Head of Research and Learning Information Services at the University of Aberdeen, which is based in the UK, and my pronouns are she and her.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, it's not morning. I'm Jason Clark. My pronouns are he, him. My current title is Head of Research, Analytics, Optimization, and Data Services at Montana State University. Really happy to be here.
So thanks very much, and I'm going to get us started. So welcome to our session. We've all introduced ourselves. As I say, my name is William Nixon. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm really delighted to be here today with Jason and Susan. I've only recently become RLUK's Deputy Director, but I have been part of these Transatlantic Digital Skills meetings and the community since its outset, and I'm already registered in the skills directory, which Susan will talk about later in today's talk. On April 26, 2021, 50 colleagues from Research Libraries UK's Digital Scholarship Network and CLEAR's Digital Library Federation Data and Digital Scholarship Working Group came together to explore the possibilities and benefits of creating a transatlantic digital skills exchange. Today, we're going to share the story behind that meeting, but also an opportunity for us to share how RLUK and CLEAR have built that transatlantic skills community. And that will encompass the genesis of the idea, a walkthrough of one of our workshops, some of our deliverables, success stories, and our future plans. So the genesis of the idea, those working within research libraries will know that digital scholarship can be complex. It's a loosely defined umbrella term that includes a variety of processes, services, and applications, ranging from GIS and data mapping to artificial intelligence, library processes, research data management. The multifaceted nature of it means that those working in digital scholarship need a wide variety of ever-changing skills to reflect the ongoing development of techniques, practices, and tools. These not only relate to increasingly complex technical processes, but the softer, more generic skills, enabling effective advocacy, developing grant applications, and project management. And although formal training programs and courses are available in a wide variety of these topics relating to digital scholarship, they're not all applicable to research library environments. They can be expensive, and it can be sometimes difficult to translate some of those classroom-based learning into real-world applications and practice. Those challenges were really part of the framework around a number of bespoke and tailored training and skills development programs, which have been created to support digital scholarship within research libraries. There's a wealth of knowledge amongst our community and expertise contained across our communities, both the result of this formal training and also the real world tuition. However, though, the real challenge is how can we harness this wealth of collective expertise, this knowledge and experience for the mutual benefit of one another and the wider research community. So next slide, please, Susan. So here we have a little bit of the detailing of the light bulb moment, which my colleague Matt Greenhall, the previous deputy director of RLUK, sort of had as part of reaching out to Jason and his colleagues to explore some of this and how that could be taken forward, how it could be informed by some of that pandemic thinking and experience, and the recognition that really people needed a community, which led to that light bulb moment. And there were 4 kind of underpinning factors which supported that vision to collectively connect, the opportunity for colleagues to collaborate, and opportunities to have confidence with online tools. You know, as the pandemic had moved forward, colleagues rapidly became familiar with Zoom and Teams, but also new, what were at the time to us, new tools like Jamboard and Mentimeter to enable those kind of collaborations and to explore new ways to innovate. So we're really excited to be able to share how we've developed and built some of this work. So I'm going to pass over to Jason now, who's going to take us further on that journey.
Thanks, William. So one of the other things we wanted to recognize, this is something that happened with lots of contributions and willingness to build something. So I'm just going to float through and show a few of the people that were part of this and are still part of it. And you can kind of see a timeline on there. I'm not going to read the slides, so you can kind of understand. One of the things I want the group, as we talk about how we got to where we are, noting just the planning that happened, the sort of time involved, and also the I think I mentioned this, the willingness of people to contribute, and it was of a moment in time, which is what William was speaking to. There was a growing community and interest. Some of us were feeling maybe a bit more isolated than we had been as the pandemic was beginning. We had some different kinds of comfort with the way that online exchanges could happen. But the group sort of worked through this timeline together and came, connected with a digital scholarship, the Digital Scholarship Network with RLUK, and then the Data and Digital Scholarship Working Group inside of CLEAR. And the vision was how do we connect? How do we continue to build skills? How can we do this in an international setting? Next slide. A couple of others. You can kind of see it grows, Susan, as you push through. You can see there's Kirsty, Eleonora come on, and then if you push forward again, next slide. There's William and Carol. So these are some of our newest collaborators. Next slide. One of the things we wanted to show this group was not only the timeline and contributors, but also the really where we're going with part of this second section is we wanted to show you if you're going to do this work, how can you, what are some of the, not only the lessons learned, but just generally the steps we took to try to find success with an online international working group. Okay. So next slide. What you'll see as I walk through this is an example of various ways that we planned, set expectations, and our goals at the top of the collaboration are listed here. What we had seen and what we were trying to work towards was a more dynamic, engaged environment. There were times that Sarah and I, inside of the DDS, the Data Digital Scholarship Working Group, at CLEAR had tried to do some dynamic, sort of interactive presentations and or guest speakers. And one of the things we noticed is once you move towards an engagement and asking others who are in the room to maybe participate, you might see what we were noticing was varied engagement at that moment. Sometimes people would bounce out of the room. So as we came into these discussions with Matthew and RLUK, we wanted to think about how can we make this work? And this section right here, next slide, we'll kind of talk through, give a template and some examples of how we tried to build engagement. And this did lead to some success that Susan's going to speak to later. So one of the first things we did was look for expressions of interest. We wanted to gather a sense of what the community wanted. So we did do a survey to sort of understand where people were, what kind of engagement they wanted, but also what kind of skills they wanted to learn about. Next slide. We also, it's small and it's in yellow there, we required registration. One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to understand the cohort that was coming into the session so that we could do things like potentially pair individuals, think about session groupings, people with similar interests moving into different breakout groups, but also using the registration to help us understand where we would go in the future. Usually that involved, it's a simple registration process, but not losing sight. And for this group, if you're thinking about engagement or just organization of events, we wanted to bring up the importance of that registration because we used it as a primary data point. Next slide. We also, given what we saw in the expression of interest, we saw that there was not only an interest in connecting, but in connecting on a certain set of skills, but also in that pandemic moment, people wanting to share what they know, wanting to connect in a learning community. So that sort of shifted the expressed goals of this community, of the Transatlantic Partnership, towards more of certainly networking, but also skill sharing. And Susan will speak to what resulted from that overall goal. We also looked for previous topics that people were interested in. But all of this was part of, there's a lot of this pre-work that happened before we came to events. Next slide. The goal of bringing together these groups was obviously skill sharing and networking, like I mentioned. But what I wanted to show this group was give you all kind of a takeaway about what an example session looked like. So there was this like context and background setting, small group discussions and networking opportunities. We did bring in speakers from international, from our international partners and local partners to provide some kind of talking points around the particular topics that were featured in that particular event. And we ran 4 events, I think, through 2021 up until about a year ago. And William's going to speak on where we're going next, or where we hope to go next. But every session sort of followed this template. So we wanted to give back to the community and just give you a kind of roadmap for if you wanted to do this work, or if you're thinking about this work. This is kind of what, in our case, this is what worked really well for us. Next slide. Oh, yeah, this is featured. Following some of a DLF model, if you've been to clearer DLF events, there's a very strong interest and support for community thoughts, documents, notes. So we followed that model, and actually this is a live community doc that I've linked. You can feel free to go there, and in addition, add any other thoughts or comments or notes about this session, the current session. But you also get a read on previous sessions. They are sort of archived in that document itself, so you can kind of see where those previous sessions went and the kind of questions that came up. and provides a bit of institutional memory and a current community to sort of connect to. Next slide. Just wanted to put on, this was in our last event. I'm going to show 3 different activities. I won't really, I want to give you a chance to you can just read the slide. But the activity it follows a pattern of like small groups, just generally getting connected. Then next slide. Short talks. This would be, in this case, the March 22nd was collections as data. So we had a couple of different experts or topical leads. So we would allow for just a little bit about like what are they doing in this environment, give them a chance to introduce themselves. Those were short breakout rooms. And if you remember, we were very intentional about with registration, bringing people into the areas where they were interested. So these short talks might, these would be at the full forum. Everybody would see these. And then if you go to the next slide, the conversations would be a little more curated, and you could move into an environment where you're able to specialize and really go a little into more depth with a speaker and interested individuals. Next slide. Susan's going to take us through deliverables.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I'm just going to talk about some of the outputs that we got as part of the community events that we held. And as Jason said, we took quite a lot of time when we were designing our infrastructure for how we delivered these workshops. We've gone through those slides, which shows actually quite a lot of planning that went into this. The first one probably took us quite a lot of time to decide how we were going to run it. I can see Jason nodding because it definitely did. But once we had that in place, we really felt we could just run them a lot quicker after that, because we knew what worked and we had the feedback. And we designed things in such a smart way that would enable us to have outputs that the community could use who join the events or beyond the events. But we could also use some of that data that we gathered to plan our future events as well. So one of the key outputs then that we developed, and this was quite early doors, was we developed this skills directory. So as Jason mentioned, one of the first things that we did when we were setting up this community is we put out a survey to ask people about what their thoughts were in terms of digital scholarship, where they'd like to learn more, where they might have some expertise. As a result of that, we thought this is really useful data, one for us planning the events, but actually this would be really useful data for the community in terms of the areas of expertise, maybe where there might be gaps actually in our knowledge as well. So one of the outputs that we developed was this skills directory. And hopefully when I stop presenting the slides, I can provide a link to the skills directory because it is still live. So it's still available to you. So it wasn't just open to our community, this was open beyond that. So it is available to all for people to have a look at. So you could register your interest in this and mark your skills level across the skills that William went through at the beginning in terms of like GIS, maybe it was partnership and advocacy, across the range of digital scholarship skills. So we had this directory that people can use. There's a link in these slides as well, so we can share the slides to an introductory video of how you can use that and interact with it. I'll just talk a bit more about this in terms of the skills directory and what we were trying to get from this. So people can register their area of interest and also what support they were willing to give. So whether they would offer maybe one-to-one support, a meeting in that way, whether they would facilitate a workshop, have a curated conversation. So by curated conversation, that was maybe you wanted to send some questions beforehand, so there was that preparation time. And you could use this to book in a time with those experts. So it was really great that we got people registering to do this. And we got a lot of engagement from the community. We did use this at each of the sessions. So we introduced it at the first session, but we did remind our audience each time that they could go into this and add to the skills directory. So we did have this as a growing resource as we got different people who attended the different sessions that we ran. And also, I've put that register your interests or expertise. We've got new people, I'm sure, joining us on this call today, and it's great to have you all here and to share our experiences with you and engage in a conversation. So if there is, either want to look at that to maybe build your skills, or if you want to join and share your skills with the community, that is open and a live resource. It's probably something that we'll pick up on next steps as well, what we might want to do with that in the future. And just another note on the skills directory, and maybe how we tried to design our infrastructure in a smart way that could work for us as organisers, but really work for the community as well, is we didn't want people to just join the directory if they were an expert. You can join this if you are a beginner, because there's great value in sharing your beginnings, two beginners meeting up to share their experiences of let's learn together, because we got a lot of feedback at events of people wanting to not necessarily meet someone who was streets ahead of them, because that was scary, that was intimidating, that made them feel like that was just not achievable. So actually having these levels of beginner, intermediate and expert, we found really useful. And another useful way we used that data as organisers was we could go into the skills directory and identify people to deliver those short talks that Jason talks about. So if they were an expert, invite them in to talk about their experience and share with the community. But also we could use it to have a look where we maybe didn't have as many experts, or a lot of people were at a beginner level, to really look at what the skills gauge was across the community of those people who'd shared, so that we could look and identify topics from that beyond the first survey in terms of what the community might like. So we didn't have to always send out an evaluation form or redo a survey for people, because we had this live data that was available. Another output as well as part of our community practice that we created is we really wanted to openly share the resources that we had, the slides that were prepared, the recordings of the sessions. So we did set up a OSF site as well, which is still live now. So you can go back to that and see the sessions that we captured. There's links to the skills directory once again there, but yes, there's links to each of the slide decks that we got permission from our presenters to be able to share. And as Jason mentioned, there's also links to our community notes there that we hope to be that ongoing resource that people can go back to and see what was discussed at that moment in time, maybe even add some comments of what they might think as well. So I'm now just going to move on to, we're all going to sort of join in this section to kind of share some of our success stories and the metrics that we got from developing and building this shared community of practice. So if it's okay, I'll just start off with some of the high level things that I noticed in terms of the colleagues that attended, and also myself. I felt really lucky to be involved in this project, to work with new people. And I actually valued from going to these sessions, although we were organising, I was also an active participant as well, as much as everyone else. So I got to do that. And one of the things that I thought was a real great success was that making those connections beyond the sessions. Because at the beginning of the session, as Jason explained, we put people into small breakout groups with just a couple of pointers to say, oh, introduce yourself and that kind of thing. And off the back of that, I know people from my team, I was working at York at the time, had follow-up conversations with the people that they met in those breakout rooms, because they picked up on an area, maybe it was Python, developing some coding and wanted to follow up on how that worked. Maybe it was developing some skills training. So we really found out that people were sparking those conversations that people wanted to continue beyond the event. I will now move on and hand over to colleagues to share some of their insights.
Mhm. Well, I can jump in with one particular. So Neil Stewart and I were in a breakout room together. And at the time, he was at London School of Economics. And that became the impetus for a series of scholarly outputs that you see on here. So there was a presentation at an international conference and a published paper. But beyond that, we continue to meet. And now we've even moved into different roles. Neil is now at the University of London. Helen Williams is our metadata lead at London School of Economics. Dorlin Rossman is my library dean. We all meet. We meet at least monthly to continue to talk about this research, to talk about how things are going in our positions. So it's become not only something that produces research for the field, but a general support network of individuals. And this all started from a breakout room that Neil and I had we got paired together because we were interested in digital library work. So that's just one of the sort of local, or one of my experience with success. But I'll leave William if you want to jump in, or Susan if you want to add anything
I think, although this is very much, a transatlantic skills directory and a skills community, one of the other kind of examples here is between two UK universities, University of York and the London School of Economics, who again, through the breakout groups and these meetings and the connections, have been sharing work around, the London School of Economics has been sharing work around their community of practice for data share, their data shapers and their research data with colleagues in York. They met as recently as a few months ago and are continuing to build on that. So although there is absolutely, fantastic opportunities, across that kind of transatlantic kind of element, it's actually for us within the UK, and I guess there'll be examples across North America, where you can make those connections and start to build on those. And as Susan was saying, there are those sparks that that you get. I had commented earlier, I was a participant from the very early meetings, and I think the model that kind of Susan and Matt and Jason all had laid out was very, very effective. They had front loaded, so much of that work had been front loaded around the pairing, around the registration, and then being in small groups, just small groups of 2 or 3 with our cameras off, was a really great way to kind of demonstrate that these were really good ice-breaking opportunities for us to all just introduce ourselves. We had that template, what are some of your skills, what university are you from, and so on. It was a really nice mix there. And I think, as Jason had commented early on, there was that that sort of that need for community, that sense that building on that shared experience that we were all having, albeit kind of being necessarily either homeworking or being on campus, perhaps not as much, and being able to share some of that experience internationally, and with peers, I think was absolutely fantastic. And I think that leads me to the third point here. There's that community, that beyond institutions, the community success of the program, that sort of sense check that we could do just when you actually got to talk to people one-on-one. There is sometimes a sense, but perhaps rightly, within the UK, we can look at the US and North America, and you can see, how far ahead there's a perception of how much that work is being done. And at scale, some of that is, but when you really drill down to some of that granularity, being able to see where individual institutions are, being able to go, oh yeah, we're kind of only a few paces behind you, or we're at a similar stage. You know, being able to do some of that sense check around the progress and status was in many ways actually reassuring, and also in many ways helped to further some of those connections and those partnerships. Because I think, again, as Susan had commented, I think, you know, we really wanted to break down this notion that you needed to be some kind of hyper expert to be part of the skills directory or to be part of this community. This was a community for all. This was a community about skills sharing and being able to do some of that buddying. If you were, you know, for instance, two beginners, you know, who perhaps were both wanting to look at R or do something on Python or you know, some GIS, you know, activity or so on, then there was really great opportunities to do some of that collaboration, and to do it in a really respectful, really kind of safe, professional, collegiate space. So I think, you know, those are some of, just across the board, some of the success stories which I think we can have. But I'll pass back to Jason and Susan as well for anything else around these.
I'm typing because I want to link. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to move on to actually some of the metrics, really, because it was
sure.
If that's okay. So yeah, it was great. Some of this, I don't want to drill it down to metrics because that wasn't our purpose. Our purpose was to bring people together to have conversations. And as William and Jason have both said, I think, you know, trying to just set up, because we couldn't have serendipitous encounters, us trying to facilitate that in the way that we did our groups and had those activities. And I think you can't really capture on a slide the success of that, but I think it was great for the community. And I think it really helped at a time where you couldn't get out, that we could do something together. But we did get some things which I feel are measurable and maybe useful for you to share here in terms of, so on our skills directory, we did get people engaging with that. We've got some stats on the screen there. So there were 28 institutions that we've got represented across there, and hopefully we'll get a few more today. We've got that link to the skills directory there. And we've got 34 members within there. And we've got 260 skills entries and 27 topics. And as I say, it wasn't everyone's putting that they were an expert in an area. You were able to indicate those different skills level, because it was all about being inclusive and giving people the opportunity to meet with people should they want to. Or if you didn't want to sign up to it, there wasn't that pressure that everyone who attended had to sign up to that. It was still there for them to use the community. The other thing is we wanted that active participation and engagement in meetings. And so, as Jason said, we did ask people to register beforehand, and we did make it very clear that this was going to be participatory. And, you know, please, can you let us know if not unregister if you're not going to? I mean, you're always going to have people who are going to drop out on a Zoom call, you know, and that's because of their circumstances. I'm not making a judgment of that. Sometimes you just we've got to reprioritize, haven't we? But we did get a good turnaround in terms of booking to attending the meetings, which was really positive. And we usually had about, like today really, wasn't it, Jason? Probably about 50 people on the call, which was a nice number, which meant that when we went into breakout rooms, the larger ones, there was usually enough of a crowd of about maybe 20 people maximum, but not too much that our participants might feel scared of speaking up in there. A lot of people would put a camera on even in the bigger groups and would actually, you know, engage in either way that they wanted to, whether in the chat or verbalise the questions that they wanted to ask. I am going to hand on to William, if you wanted to say anything about the kind of recognition in the strategy for RLUK.
Yeah, so for Research Libraries UK, we have a digital shift kind of strand around our strategy, which is about that shift to digital, the shift within kind of digital as we're making that transition, and how equitable that shift can be. And one of the things which is actually in some of our kind of deliverables underpinning our digital shift strand of the strategy is a recognition and a review of the transatlantic kind of skills community and the skills directory. And I think it's really important to kind of highlight that, the organic nature to some extent of this has also been sort of recognized within our strategy. There's ways in which we are, as we'll come to, ways in which we want to look ahead at what could be some future plans around that, and being able to share and kind of collaborate today is a really exciting opportunity to do some of that kind of rebooting and sharing around it. So I think we might be on to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry, I can't work. I can't work the slides today. Apologies for that. And I just wanted to pick up on, you might be looking at these stats thinking, well, that's not high visits. That's not great in terms of this is our OSF page. But actually, I took a look at this the other day and I was like, hey, we are still getting traffic to our resources that we've openly shared. And we haven't had a meeting for about 12 months, is it, Jason, do you think, since we ran our last event?
Yep, it was last mid-March, so it was about a year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so I thought, actually, it's useful to share this with you in terms of just saying what we were hoped in terms of those resources would still be engaged with. We are still getting people, daily kind of nearing, not quite daily, but every other day, say, engaging with those resources and taking a look at the slides. So, I just think as a platform, that OSF platform has been something useful for us to use, and just as that repository so that we could openly share, so that they are available to the community that we created and beyond. And now I will hand over to have a look at future plans.
Thanks very much, Susan. So as sort of Susan has commented, it has been about a year since we last ran an event. That mix of sort of returning to, returning to campuses, returning to offices, various other kind of activities. However, as Susan has also pointed out, there's still interest and there's still engagement. And indeed, this session was actually supposed to be run quite some time ago. So actually having it moved to now has become actually a really valuable kind of catalyst for where we kind of move forward with the skills directory. And it's really interesting to see a number of people who are on the Google Doc there. We've shared the Skillshare directory link and the blog post. But if you go to the next slide, Susan, please. There we go. So one of the things that I'm going to touch on is, that there could be a bit of a reboot and a refresh of topics. I don't think we'd heard the 3 dreaded letters GBT, at the time. When we were looking at that, yes, we've already had sessions around kind of AI and so on, but really interesting to sort of, take that state. I think it's really good to continue to reboot and refresh that. And shortly we'll share what, some of those are. Being able to look at spinning up a new series of these sessions. We've already got, as Susan and Jason had said, there's basically, the cookbook for a successful, transatlantic skills community. There's also been, quite a lot of change, on the side of Research Libraries UK. We've got new co-conveners in our digital scholarship network. We've created a new network around open strategy. So, we're bringing in new colleagues, new members into the community, as I'm sure, is the same in North America. There's that question around strategic alignment. I noted earlier, we can see where really valuable tools like building these kind of communities can sit within, within skills and, and beyond. One of the takeaways, and I think some of the homework for Susan, Jason, and I is, a little bit of a hack and a blog around this implementation and some of what we have been talking about today in terms of that work. I think there's discussions to be had around, should we be looking as well beyond sort of kind of DLF and Research Libraries UK. We're part of kind of IARLA. There's a broader, confederation of different organizations, different bodies. It may be worth exploring. And also there's all kinds of other initiatives as well. Research Libraries UK is running a number of kind of fellowship programs, catalyst programs, and also services, ARL's kind of research position description bank is very, very valuable. It can be a trove of information around potentially kind of digital skills and a really valuable resource, particularly around both recruitment and kind of readiness for that. So there's a number of different angles for us to kind of explore and pursue on the back of this. So if we go to the next slide, please, Susan. So I'm not, you'll be reassured to hear, going to go through all of these topics. These are really, some of these were some of the ones that I'd kind of mentioned at, the beginning of the session, the joys of copyright and licensing, so it's not just, not just about language, metadata creation, text and data analysis, and so on. So I think there's scope for us to have a look at that, to look at some of our colleagues where new colleagues who are coming in, bringing new skills, new levels, being able to also continue to reflect some of the changes around the kind of fairly dynamic space of digital scholarship. So if we go to the next slide, please, Susan. And as I say, talking about alignment, we have, certainly on the Research Libraries UK side as well, looking at, digital skills workforce strategy. Where does, building this digital skills community, that's part of an umbrella of a number of initiatives around being able to help both our existing kind of staff, but also, as Susan and Jason were commenting, if we think about, what are the gaps that are showing up when we start to look at some of this work as well? Where are we missing, some staff? Where can we look at how we can fill some of that? So, there's a number of different vectors which, the skills directory and the community can really help and support us with. And if we go to the next slide. And, as we are here today, the three of us, we want to hear your ideas. Jason's posted the link. I've added a couple of links to the blog and the Skillshare directory, but really, we're really also interested in, in your thoughts, different models that we could use. What would you find potentially useful? Can you share some useful models that already exist that we might not already know about? Funding is always good, any available funding opportunities around that. And also, really, would you be willing to put your virtual or real hand up and help and get involved, become part of our community and help us really take the Transatlantic Skills Community and Directory to that next level? So, and I think that might be that. Take us to the last slide. There we go. So thank you very much for your attention. And we are pretty much on the time. Is there anything, Jason and Susan, do you guys want to chip in? Anything that I've missed?
No, I think you've done a wonderful job. I think one other note I would make about, working through the transition in leadership, Matt moving to Liverpool, you moving into Deputy Executive Director, finding our way with that. And I'm really excited about where we go from here.
Absolutely. Me too. So, and this has been a fantastic catalyst and a really great opportunity. So I guess, Aaliyah, do we bring you back in now for any Q&A or any feedback that we've had from colleagues or colleagues on the session today who want to sort of raise anything beyond? We will be sharing the slides, and and we'll have the links. Well, in fact, Jason's already shared the slides via the chat there as a PDF, which is brilliantly effective and a digital skills ninja.
Yeah,
I'm
so
working
I'm
through
not
some
seeing any
permissions.
questions in the chat at the moment.
Mhm.
So if folks want to unmute and ask their questions that way, that's also fine. And I'll keep an eye on the chat as well. So yeah.
I can stop sharing the slides now just so that we can bring it back into the room. And if people want to put their cameras on or would prefer to keep them up, that's fine.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question of the participants. Is there any of the participants who are currently in the Skillshare directory or would like to, have had their interest piqued about joining the Skillshare directory and our community? Just a little bit of reverse flipping there for those of us as the speakers now asking the audience some questions.
Oh, we've got a thumbs up, so I think that's someone in the audience who's hopefully on the directory or wants to join the group. I think one of the things I wanted to share maybe is a kind of lesson learned from this, or as we went through, we talked a lot about like kind of setting up that design, but it might have felt like, oh, this was loads of work, and I think actually one of the things I would like to say was it wasn't too arduous for us as the organisers for it. Once we thought this through, once it was a few Zoom calls each time, and it felt really genuine to be in this community where the community really engaged and provided the talks and provided the topics for us. So I think that was something that I thought was a real positive from the experience, and a lesson learned of spending that little bit of time planning to begin with then really did save us time later.
Yeah, and I think a comment I would make as well is that certainly from my former institution at the University of Glasgow, when I joined these sessions as a participant, there was a lot of institutional support around that as well. There was value, there was that sense of value of being part of this community, building some of those connections. Or in some cases, it's great actually with Jason. I can say anecdotally, I know Jason through another community, through open repositories, and being able to create sort of new connections and kind of reweave some different opportunities and different ways to engage, but very, very much that institutional support, because they could see value around that. And we're all wrestling with the collective challenge of skills, upskilling, staff recruitment, being able to actually be provide some of that support and some of those pathways for development and so on as well. We clearly answered everybody's questions.
Okay, well, maybe we can leave one more minute just in case someone's furiously typing and we can't see that they're doing that. Maybe one more minute. We can wrap a couple minutes early if not.
Yeah, just add that frisson of jeopardy to a
I know, right?
Final questions.
Yeah.
And I tried to make, I'm kind of learning as I go. I guess when you make a default update to OSF, it's private. So I'm just trying to turn on those links so people can get to the presentations.
Yeah, and we can also
Continue
add
to
those
watch
when we add the recording to YouTube.
Okay.
We can add the links to the description. So that'll give us a little more time to figure out any tech, viewing issues.
Okay.
Oh, great. And there's a question that came in. How wonderful. Great. So there's a question that says, this is a great project. Thanks for the interesting presentation. Have you thought about how it might compare to the Digital Curation Network, how it operates?
The DCN. No, I haven't. I guess I'm not as familiar with DCN. How does let me ask, how does it operate? Is it a more voluntary, or are there fellowships? Is there funding?
And it's definitely something we could potentially pick up subsequently, but I don't know if Diane wants to sort of come in and follow up on that. Again, yeah, it's not something I'm assuming that's
Okay.
CSI.
So
CN.
Diane,
Yeah, and there's a comment
Diane's-
now that says, I believe it's a collaborative sharing of services model across organizations, if I understand it properly.
Mhm. And you could see that we were working through more of a voluntary model. But when Matthew, as Matthew was moving into a new role, there was, and Susan, I believe you were part of parts of these conversations, there was an interest in more of a going towards more of a shared, not only a shared governance structure, but a shared funding. And that shared funding might start with something like a grant, a joint grant opportunity, where we'd have more of a structure and more fiscal infrastructure for the group.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much for the
Yes.
question.
Yep. Thanks, Diane.
So great. So I think we can take this opportunity to begin to wrap up. So thanks so much to our presenters for that great presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be sharing a recording of this session on CLEAR's YouTube account in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that. We do have 2 more of these sessions taking place next week, both at 1 p.m. Eastern US time on Thursday and Friday of next week. So please join us for those if you're available. Your registration for this session means that you're registered for those as well. So you should be all set joining in the same way you did today. And as a reminder, our calls for proposals for our in-person events in St. Louis coming up this November are open through May 1st. So that's for the DLF Forum, Learn at DLF, and NDSA's digital preservation. Links to the calls for proposals and submission instructions are now in the chat. And thank you all so much once again to our presenters and to all of our attendees on a Friday, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a lovely
Nice
weekend.
to meet you all. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.